Winning isn't everything. When I received the topic today, it was due to the nature of some of my overzealous friends in my mind, correct? How many of us are working with souls who want to win when they're guided by who we are as souls? When I tell you that the family trees I often work with have been a pain in the butt, it's not my fault, is what many would say. This is the nature of those of us who are not trying to compete, but we find ourselves in the throes of passion for the competition of the minds. This is where many are finding themselves online, and Brenda is saying, I'm so sick of the competition of whose guidance is superior than others, when in fact others are saying, it helps me more to be more enlightened to the nature of who I am. If someone is telling you that you're all that and more, why wouldn't you go with that one? Right? How many people know that? I love you, set me free is where others are. They want to be told that they're loved, cherished, and adored. But the process of getting there isn't always easy. And it means that sometimes we have to put our hearts aside and come with our heart sets, right? This is the nature of those who have connected through their heart versus their mind. Now, what that means is many will say, I'm always connected through my heart. We all are, but our minds are very much our creative weapons or our creative masterpieces, depending on how you look at it. It depends on the moment of every day is what most are saying, right? Most of us are not challenging each other to rise up into some vision of better than others or less than others. Okay? But for those of us who are rising in the vision of I love who I am, it can be hard when others are saying, but you're not as good as X, Y, or Z, or your vision isn't as good for me. That's the nature of love for each soul, by the way, to know that we aren't everyone's cup of tea. Okay, Brenda loves the challenge of success, but she fails miserably is where others might see her thinking that somehow she's supposed to be arriving on the scene or on the screen with glitz and glamour galore. She's casually calm. She's delved into the values of soul from various perspectives, honoring all for the most part, except those that say that there's something wrong with her. Now, what is it about that is so disheartening? When you see her vision come out on the screen, saying there are issues to be looked at, perhaps, it doesn't mean that we say, oh, I don't attach any identity to it, but that's what people are working with. I identify with this issue or that issue or some label that others are placing before me as superior functioning, perhaps. Brenda knows she's working with those souls on her soul level who have identified as various labels before, and others are saying, I can't be that. You need to change up your messaging. It's not about being a certain value type, perhaps, right? Others are saying that my label tells people who I am in my mind, and I'm cherished and adored for it from my soul. However, if your label has issues within the community in which you reside, that's not always going to be easy, correct? Right? And some people will say, but it's what's needed is to conquer and win. And this is what Brenda's been working with, is this idea that people are trying to conquer the issues rather than delve into the issues. And when they delve into the issues, they might see a different side of things, perhaps. Brenda's doing that vision currently with race relations in her heart, saying, I understand there's certain identities that people are taking on that are holding me less than. And it's not something that a soul does. Okay, we honor the vision of victimhood wherever we ride in it or wherever others are in it. And people don't like that word. They don't like that characterization. They will say this is the nature of who we are and the cards that we were dealt. Now, what does this mean? It means that she's being honest with her journey, right? This is the journey of soul, and winning and losing is not really discussed much as what it was when she was in relationship with certain souls who have that natural flair for competition, because in essence it's their vision of, I'm going to perfect my skills of seduction, which is what she dealt with another soul who was trying to seduce others around her. And then there was I'm trying to perfect my vision of soul, which is where Brenda was, which was more in the idea of loving everyone wherever they were. However, if you affect her personally, you better watch out, right? It's more like those who are trying to either create a dramatic situation of win-lose. That's when Brenda says, now we're going toe-to-toe then. If you want to try and have me become something less than who I am, I don't look at the world as a competition. It's not a stage of desire either. My vision is of being the best that I can be, and that's where most people are. And that's the beauty of it. So that natural state of I'm competing with those on topics that aren't even of interest to me, correct, is what many start to see. They see the competition on the screen of so many souls saying they've got the answers for everybody. All you need to do is X, Y, or Z. And it may work for a lot of people. And depending on your methods, you may want to go with someone who's gone through the gambit of soul vision, which allows her to receive her guidance directly and through a proper channel of vision. She's not channeling at this moment. She's utilizing her soul's vision to bring forth the understanding of who she is, why she is the way she is, and how she became to be, right? How she was. This is part of her soul's vision, is to do the work that others would be afraid to do, because it is a very revealing and intimate process. So if someone then starts to hear other negative stuff, people say, well, that's your cue that you're not of the highest yet. It's a moment in time. We are not static beings always highlighting the vision of our positivity on the screen, are we? This is where Brenda is in many ways, but it's more like when the positivity hits, that's when you strike gold. When you can feel positive about who you are, how you are, and how you got here, that's how you are, right? How many people say, I lost hope, I dug deep, I rose out of the ashes, and I burned everyone around me? Brenda did no such thing in essence. Some will say that. She made some drastic choices that were needed to be made. She trusts her soul's vision. She also burned a bridge to several people on the other side of the veil, because in essence, their vision is, if you love me for who I am, then you don't mind me hurting you. Whoa. So that's where you are. If you're vibrating in the idea of someone's hurting me, then yes, you have to go and figure out what it is that I'm watching or aligning with that is bringing me those kinds of messages. And I can guarantee you, Tanya Tucker's on the line right now saying she's a Cowboys girl. She will howdy do to any soul and say, I love you for who you are. Just don't pick a fight with me or my mother. Right? No, this is the nature. She says she was a strong female lead singer and took the beatings of souls of so many men And this is one of those issues that Brenda herself is working with. The insults, the private label. Okay, this is another vision for us. Private label wines are better than those who are This is a different kind of message. So you see, some people want to come through in a vision of support and love for her because she cherishes their biographies or their life stories. We are not all here to rise up in this vibration that everything was hunky-dory in my whole journey. I had my ups and downs. I expect people to have a better experience than what I do, though, due to the nature of the extreme challenges I placed upon myself and the visions that I had not only as a child, but as an adult, and even into my teen years. I was still working out the incredible differences of who I was versus those around me who didn't seem to have any idea about the amount of torture other souls were going through. Okay? We're not here to demean those who are victims and who are continually in that state of victimhood. But the nature of getting yourself out of it, right, is part of that process of aligning with the highest of who you are and seeing how you can get out of those ideas that there's anyone else on the line. This is when you open up to the nature of channeling, but it's a very different vibration than what most would understand. You see, her soul is on board and she's been able to utilize that vision to attract those souls of her past, present, and future that come to her and say she's no longer a winner in the mind of certain souls because they see success as a career path only versus I can walk down the street with my head held high knowing that I've done the best that I can to not only align with who I am, but with the vision of those who are in their vision of victimhood and can see it for what it is, just a state of being in which they're riding in just in that moment. Most of us don't sit in it for that long when we go to this place because then we start to hear it. And so that's what Brenda was telling her friend on the phone previously, saying, I can't create as much with those visions of victimhood that are non-stop. Because if they are able to make other choices, those choices need to be made. Brenda was tasked with making a very difficult choice, and she jumped. And she jumped high and far. She took a risk that no one else would have done, and she got rewarded for it. However, some of those rewards were a little overwhelming for her body and her mind. And others would say, uh-oh. That's why it takes a very strong will and disposition to do this kind of work if you are not in the vision of I'm always held up around me by the most loving of souls. Right? It's harder, but it's doable. And that's why Brenda knows how to keep herself in check in her mind, for the most part, on how to keep herself and her vibration. It's not pure and clean. There's no such thing as pure and clean, by the way, but it's more about I don't need to compete with people for attention. And it's one of my limited factors because I'm so inhibited in my expression from saying what needs to be said sometimes in real life. Let's just put it that way, right? Some of us have come across as very timid and insecure in our wisdom. And when we bolt forth with the addition of our soul, that means others get a little intimidated by it. And they get to see a new side of who I am that they're not familiar with. And it can be a scary process for some if they think, who is this person? How did she arrive on the scene? That's the nature of those souls who are saying, a divorce, for instance, is a process that she went through. And it was needed for her and told to her in a way that was not the most becoming, but it was one that she knew inside was needed in that moment. That's how strong her guidance is. That's how strong her wisdom is for her and her family. yet she still creates from the place of we're still friends. We still align with taking care of each other during the process. And we do honor each other for the most part, always. We have our glitches every so often. The alignment that I do with others is not about win-win, correct? This is that kind of divorce where it's a win-win. Very much so. No one's trying to take the other one down. No one's trying to take out any loans to hurt people. No one's trying to do anything to dishonor the other. Okay? It's not the cat and mouse game either. So that's why Brenda is trying to do a vision of love about winning isn't everything versus how about we just honor those times when we don't feel like we've won and we're feeling a little defeated. It gives us the perspective of when we're on the high. So those emotions that we have of I'm feeling defeated in my mind, right? Some people will do that to you. Some people will come at you and say, I'm going to take you on. I'm going to take you down. And I'm going to make sure you suffer for what you did to me. I went through that process with someone else, and it was not a pleasant process. Luckily, I'm very charged with energy and always attached to the nature of who I am as soul. Others will say it's something else if you're hearing negativity. No, it's your vibration. Most people will assume that an attachment to the soul is a negative entity. And to be honest, most people are working with their own souls. They just don't realize it, to be honest. That's why people are afraid of who they are. Right? Oh, I would never say anything like that to myself. I said that as well. But in essence, sometimes the thoughts that we have in our subconscious are then brought to us to tell us more about who we are. Now, when we open up to the nature of I'm guiding everybody else or other people, that's even more important for us to stay clear of those. It's the negative forces of energy, right? It's not negative. It's just a different vibration that doesn't feel good for certain souls. Brenda's not all about the hanky-panky on the soul level that some are. People are romanticizing a lot of soul level stuff. Good for them. There's a lot of great things being created for it. But Brenda is more down to earth and common sense and saying people are glamorizing a lot of things that will not really end well for a lot of people. I don't want to put fear in the minds, but to be honest, some of the things, all it would take would be a few questions, and then people might start to re-examine what they think is the most beautiful thing in the world, the pain and recovery of who they are. That's soul retrieval. She had to go through that. And it's not the easiest when you've had a rough life sometimes, because if you've stuck in the victimhood for a long time, which I did, those questions and answers start to come through. People are starting to ask questions about her experience with love from the other side of the veil. I know what it's like to make love with that vision. And what that means is those souls who are honest, who have loved ones, they know what that's like when they go either in the dream state or whatnot to that vision of I'm connecting in various places. This is the honesty of what people need to start to hear. Okay, so this is a win-win for her soul because in essence, people are saying, oh, this is the idea of the goody-goody two-shoes. And Brenda's saying, that's not who I am. But it's the public persona that many are trying to work through. Okay, to say, I understand if you have, a sexual energy that gets charged in a certain way. I don't know how this is about winning, but then that is going to be portrayed to you on the other side of the veil. And so it comes to you and then it feels good. But what can happen is if you let society's dictates start to determine how you are to express, that inhibits people from expressing how they want to be perceived or how they want to be. Right? I'm not here to be perceived as that, because for me, the guidance that I really truly love for everyone is more about the nature of self-respect. And what my vision is just a personal interpretation. I'm not going to judge anyone else if they've got things going on. But it's about whether or not you're ready for that kind of information. But this is why I can go there with souls who might be having any kinds of issues, sexual dysfunction issues, bigotry issues, any kinds of, transphobia issues, any kinds of issues. I've dealt with so many issues from a soul level, and I burned out at one point. I didn't burn out. Well, I did burn out. I was very tired. And now it's more like the free and clear vision of let's talk about these issues that others don't want to talk about, because everyone says, oh, it's just about love. Just say it's love and then you're good. It's not about peacekeeping either. I keep the peace for my family for the most part, because isn't that a nice place to be? Now, if I'm looking at peace as war to create peace, that's another win-win, right? We've eventually created peace, but we actually had a dynamic of win and lose. And that's where this idea of winning isn't everything is really supposed to be coming through, because in essence, we find ourselves in those situations where it's more like a lose-lose. No one's winning when others are hurting. No one's winning when someone is feeling defeated. And so that's why we want people to lift themselves up to the point where they can feel free to be who they are. Hey, for those of you, let your freak flags fly. It is all accepted and adored. What we don't do is try to hurt others. And when people say, but this hurts me, if you are just offended by someone's way of being, that's your issue to work with. And I know how to handle that with delicacy as well. Because many of us are in that vision of I'm now free and clear from the constraints of society that have conditioned me that there's something wrong with who I am or how I portray myself to be. It's like the lightning before the storm. That's where Brenda goes. She's the lightning before the storm. She is so... she has some admirers who come to her. But in essence, it's not the easiest route to be with someone like me, because I don't put up with a whole lot of BS. If you see something wild and woolly, that's another thing. I let most people be who they are, and I love them for it. I have my own issues. I have my own values. I'm not claiming to be perfect in any other way other than I'm just like anybody else. I'm human. Okay, I'm soul having human experience. And now my soul is with me. And so I'm having that aspect of what my life is like come through for me. Many men are saying, ooh, this sounds like fun, not understanding the values that they place on women to be a certain way. And if not, they're not happy. So this is why we want those partnerships to be more about the win-win rather than, winner take all. Okay? And sometimes it's okay to say, you win. I'm done. Some people need to feel like they have to win in order to be acknowledged as something of value, perhaps. Right? They get their values off of winning. We're not talking about good-natured competition. We're talking about a dynamic where people are feeling like they're losing out on their lives, perhaps, or their luxury lifeboats. I don't know. Brenda's still on that vision of cruise ships. But anyways, she's done a lot of work with people, but she's not the most honest when it comes to the difficulties that she's gone through. And it's because she's not one and never has been one really to lay all her troubles out on the internet for everyone to just explore. So if it's more of a privacy thing, that's one thing. If it's related to how do I work through this issue from a soul level, that's a whole different story. I'm not here to gossip. If there's something on the soul level that needs to be brought through, it'll be brought through. Tanya Tucker is there saying yeehaw, right? She's a country gal at heart and said, my life was highlighted in her heart and adored for it. No matter what I did or how I portrayed myself, I was always honored and acknowledged by my own soul, and Brenda knows how to handle that kind of vision. Even though others would say she's racist, right? Brenda acknowledges those labels as limitations for who we are as souls, right? If you identify with it, that's one thing. It's your issue to identify with, and maybe you can figure out what it is that you need to work through with that. Brenda doesn't even go there. She looks at it as behaviors and choices, not as who someone is. And that's when people start to stand up and cheer, right? No, that would be some aspect of others who are having a very hard time with it. She deals with people who say that and say that that's what needs to happen. But she's like, that's not how it goes for me, and I wouldn't put that on somebody else. I know what it's like to hear labels placed on you from a soul level. And it is not easy to hear that. Knowing it wasn't mine in the first place, but they were those things that I've heard that were negative, that I didn't necessarily agree with. But I was part of the process of uncovering that part of myself that was part of that in my family. How many people want to know what that process was like? It wasn't as painful as what many would say. It's not a long process to do that work with me, because I know how to get you in a better place in your mind, because your heart isn't there, but our minds often are. That's how you deal with white supremacists. You don't condemn them for who they are. You enlighten them to the nature of what that means. Those who label them. See, Brenda has someone who she adores, who's working very much with the idea of white supremacist. But these would be white supremacy thoughts, ideals, or ideologies. Or those who are identified. They have identified themselves as that. And that's the nature of thinking versus doing. Winning isn't everything is always about the love of who we are. No matter whether we feel like we're winning or if we're in a place of less than, we know that we're losing, right? Brenda's no less than anybody else in her mind, but she knows that there are higher visions of love, higher levels of understanding. Otherwise, she wouldn't be doing what she was doing. So when people say, I'm going to go to the high of the high, then that's the nature of where many think they're going. And that's the beauty of who they are. If you're in the vision of separation from other groups of people or individuals, you are not in the high of the high. That needs to be repeated very often for people to start to see those visions. It means that you have a limitation in your heart for certain groups of people. Brenda is dealing with that on her own as well. I have resentment at some point, right? And then when I go to the nature of resentment, that's when I know I have to do some more inner work for myself. That's what I look out for. I look out for a few things about how I'm feeling or doing. If I'm getting to the point where I'm resentful of something, I know that's my cue for me to do something for me. And in turn, that will help heal the wounds in humanity. Because I'm on the soul level, and so I'm dealing with humanity's vision of what love is. All of us are, to be honest. But this is the nature of when we're getting it directly from soul. Okay? That's why it can be a hard hitter that comes through with her. Now, I want everyone to say a prayer for me now. She's a Duran Duran fan. She was watching their videos, right? Now, it was a documentary about them, and she's going gaga over them because she's like, I always loved their music. I just tuned out for a time. Life got difficult for me, very difficult. And I tuned out music that was of wise words for many. They were the pop geniuses, is what many would say, and they still create together. That's the bonding of our hearts. She's of love. So when people say that people are in fantasy land, Brenda had her moments of it going through this process. And she is about to wind this down now, since she's starting to hear from more of those souls that have more enlightening visions for her. But we want everyone to remember that even if you're feeling like you're somewhat defeated, remember it's just a perspective. It's only temporary. If at all possible, try to lift yourself up and say, this is my experience of feeling defeated. Now let me focus on the areas in which I rise up and I win, right? And that's highlighting the nature of the beauty of who you are, where you are. It's a process of understanding how many people or how many times am I demeaned in my vision versus lifted up. Okay? So with that, I want to say thank you for watching. And as my soul guided me to do, stay curious, wise, and soulful. Have a wonderful day.